double-digit rally in the Dow Industrials as we enter the final hour. The Dow hovering at 4-month highs. Oil prices, one of the key reasons oil is tumbling as we enter the final and most important hour of the trading day. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Closing Bell. I'm Maria Bartiromo at Cnbc headquarters.
At the New York Stock Exchange, I am Dylan Radigan. The markets right now are higher effectively across the board. A big day for Apple, the company announcing souped-up versions of its iPod Nano and Shuffle music players. It also unveiled the iTV, which would allow users to wirelessly import downloaded content to their televisions. And then last but not least, the company unveiling a new movie download service along with a new version of its iTunes music store. CNBC's Jim Goldman going to join us shortly with a breakdown along with his first on CNBC interview with Apple chief Steve Jobs. Meantime, lots of executive changes to tell you about today. First off, Hewlett-Packard chairwoman Patricia Dunn stepping down effective 2007. Plus, you have the ouster of Bristol-Myers chief Peter Dolan. Shares of both companies higher in the wake of the news of those resignations. And then Goldman Sachs shares up this afternoon after the company beat analyst estimates for its third quarter and announced additional share buybacks. And finally, oil prices tumbling on the day. Crude falling below $64 a barrel after the International Energy Agency cut its global consumption estimates. More from CNBC's Melissa Francis in just a moment. Maria.
And Dylan, oil stocks are lower today, really taking a cue from the price of oil. Brokerage stocks, meanwhile, doing well. They are higher on the back of Goldman's news today, a big rally in shares of Goldman Sachs. Two of this year's most beaten down sectors, networking and semiconductor companies, meanwhile, getting a lift today as well. As for the major averages, take a look at where we stand as we enter this final stretch with the Dow at the highs of the day. That's 4-month highs at 11,504 on the blue chip average, with a gain of 1%, 108 points higher on the industrial average. NASDAQ also doing well today, up 2% on the session. Technology really a leadership on the upside, 42 points higher on NASDAQ at 2215. S&P 500 looks like this, a similar chart pattern. High of the afternoon, 1313, last trade on the S&P, up 14 points, better than 1%. One of the big stories of the session, the big executive changes to tell you about. First, Dylan mentioned it, Hewlett-Packard. HP saying Chairman Patricia Dunn will step down, and she will be replaced by CEO Mark Hurd as chairman, but not until January of 2007. She'll remain a director of the company. The announcement coming after Dunn came under fire, as you know, for an investigation into leaks of confidential boardroom information. Now, the probe involved the use of private investigators who used personal information to get phone records of HP board members as well as journalists. Dunn saying in a statement that she was sorry for the methods taken in the leak investigation. Meanwhile, another person at the center of the controversy is also stepping down. George Keyworth. He is HP's longest-serving board member after being fingered for the leaks to the press. Initially, Keyworth had refused to resign when results of the probe were presented to the board back in May. Take a look at Hewlett-Packard stock today. We're looking at a pretty good rally, up 2.25% as investors react to Mark Hurd becoming chairman along with CEO Dylan.
And then another executive at the center of his own firestorm out, Bristol-Myers Squibb ousting CEO Peter Dolan at the urging of a federal monitor who found that the drug maker's patent deal with a generic competitor violated an agreement with prosecutors. The company named James Cornelius as interim chief, effective immediately. Bristol's general counsel Richard Willard also leaving the company. A federal monitor had recommended at a board meeting yesterday that Bristol fire both Dolan and Willard. Dolan had been the head honcho at Bristol since 2001. His tenure was one that was marked by a series of missteps, including the final one involving Bristol's top-selling Plavix heart drug. His attempts to keep a generic version of Plavix off the market sparked the latest shakeup at the company. Shares of Bristol this afternoon pick up 3.4% on news of the resignation.
All right, let's get right down to Wall Street. Bob Pisani, our eye on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Bob, what are you looking at today? What are some themes you're tracking?
Everybody's in a bullish mood. Now, it started out very early, Maria. I'm sure you were looking at those trade deficit numbers. You know, we hit a record on the trade deficit. It was minus $68 billion, something on that level. Normally, that's not great news, and yet all throughout on the floor of the morning, I heard people say, well, did you see the imports were really strong? Well, yes, their imports were strong. There was a negative trade deficit, but they were trying to argue that this is an indication Imports still strong means the consumer demand is still high, meaning the economy is fine. That's how you spin these things around every once in a while. So the markets were moving up throughout the morning. We really got the big move up about an hour and a half ago. Two things happened almost simultaneously. Number one, we saw oil dropping down again to multi-month lows, gasoline also dropping. And number two, take a look at the 10-year yield. We did have a Treasury auction. Rick Santelli will be by to tell you all about it. But I think demand was a lot stronger than the number of people anticipated there. And as a result of that, we saw the yield move down rather dramatically. This is an intraday of the 10-year. Look at that. We're at 4.77. We are near the multi-year lows that we've seen in the 10-year, and that rally in the 10-year that Santelli and I have been talking about has resumed once again on the strength of that auction result. As a result of these two factors, oil and the 10-year yield moving to the downside, we are seeing stocks rally rather noticeably, and two groups are big. One group is a big beneficiary, that is the transport stocks. So Continental and all the airlines have been moving up rather dramatically. The transports are now in triple-digit territory. It's been a while since this happened. We were at the lowest levels since January in the transports just a short while ago. There's a 1 month on the Continental, and you can see a nice move to the upside there. Finally, if you are long any part of the energy complex, whether it is commodities or whether it is stocks like Exxon or stocks in the oil service group or the exploration and production group, you're not happy today. Exxon has been moving down here for most part of a month. We're seeing most of the stocks in this complex down 8, 9, 10, even 12% in the last 12 or 13 trading sessions. Dylan, back to you.
All right, Bob, thank you very much. Let's get some more on Apple's stock trade in the wake of their series of announcements. CNBC's Scott Wapner at the NASDAQ market site has the trade for us. Scott.
Yeah, that's right, Dylan. A 3-month high for the NASDAQ right now is where we are, and Apple shares are moving higher right about here on the intraday. 1 o'clock Eastern or so is when the news started to trickle out from San Francisco about what Apple was doing. You see the stock traded lower, but has since recovered into positive territory. Jim Goldman's going to have a lot more coming up on exactly what Apple's doing, but let me give you a quick little rundown. Movie downloading service, 75 full-length movies from Disney, Pixar, Touchstone, and Miramax, a new Nano, more storage space, a longer battery life, and brighter screens, a new Shuffle. It's the size of a matchbox. It's pretty incredible. And games for the iPod as well. And that takes me to Electronic Arts, because it's going to supply some of those games for Apple, and those shares, as you see, when that announcement came out, you see the spike right there. Those shares went up by a couple of bucks right there. Let's also talk about Dell, because the shares are up by almost 3%, hosting its Technology Day in New York City. And Michael Dell says, and we're going to quote here, he says, speculation over the firing of CEO Rollins, and here's the quote, is useless. And you know about a number of issues that have been plaguing Dell lately, the delayed 10Q, the subpoena for the documents about the accounting, then the canceled analyst meeting. So a number of things happening for Dell right now. Those shares moving higher by about 3%. VeriSign is also in the green by 5%, about a buck, selling 51% of the ringtone company Jamba to News Corp for $188 million. And Credit Suisse is out with some positive comments on the chip sector. Let's take a look at a board at some of the stocks that are moving as a result of Credit Suisse upgrading the chip sector to an overweight. Applied Materials, Lam Research, and KLA Temcor. It says spending on memory will remain longer than most expect. I am finally going to end on Cisco Systems, up 2.5%, and this is a new 2-year high. Let's go back to you, Maria.
All right, turning our attention now to the energy market. Oil prices tumbling again today, 7 days in a row now, this time on a reduced demand forecast. CNBC's energy reporter Melissa Francis at the New York Mercantile Exchange has the energy trade. Melissa.
Dylan, crude just tanking down here today. We broke through the 200-day moving average, closed below $64 for the first time since March 23rd. On that day, we closed at $63.91. We're below that now. John Kilduff of FEMAT USA, you heard him in the last hour on Street Signs. He says the next stop down here is $58. Look at that. It's down almost 3%. Take a look at unleaded as well. It was tanking today, too, down about 2%. So what is going on? Why are we seeing this huge sell-off? Well, two big agencies out today cutting their demand forecast for 2006 and 2007. The International Energy Agency and the Energy Information Administration here in the U.S. both saying that they're cutting their demand forecast for 2006 by 100,000 barrels a day. BP saying today that it's petitioning to reopen the eastern part of Prudhoe Bay. They hope to have that up to full production by the end of October. We also heard Senator Feinstein saying today that they're looking into whether some traders there shorted the stock or shorted crude ahead of that information. Products are lower. Take a look at heating oil. That's dragging down crudes as well. And inventories right now are just really high. You want to keep an eye on that inventory data. It's out tomorrow, and that'll give us our latest look. Maria, back to you.
All right, Melissa, thanks so much. Meanwhile, on Wall Street, stocks are rallying on the heels of that drop-off in the price of oil today. Joining me with a look at what's behind today's big gains is Abhijit Chakraborty.